Today we're deep within the crypt of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California, in a series of different offices that we call the archives. There are old videos, films, audio recordings, tons and tons of rolls of blueprints for various things, pictures of Grace Cathedral through the ages, tons of other cathedrals, archives of books too that have been written about Grace Cathedral or include references to Grace Cathedral or written by people who work here. And I'm here with Michael Lampen, who's one of my favorite San Francisco characters. I don't get a chance to talk about him very much because he's always in the background of things. I always look over towards where his pew is when I'm preaching on Sundays. But Michael is the longest term employee that Grace Cathedral has. So he's been here longer than any other employee, and he may set the record for like longest term like a servant at Grace Cathedral of anybody. I wonder if you can tell us, do you know who the longest person is?
Well, of course it would be Dean Gresham.
Well, that's why I was wondering. 39 years.
39 years as Dean. That's remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. Especially because Dean Gresham didn't know whether he could come here because he was too sickly. And
at the beginning, he thought he was going to be the fog would be too much for him because he was going out preaching around various parishes, and it wasn't working. So the bishop decided to hold him back in close to the cathedral, and it worked.
Yeah, it was a great idea too, because it also focuses efforts on this block,
right,
where he lived for a while.
He did actually live here. There was actually a house where part of the present chapter house is located.
I didn't even realize that. He did,
and also in the chapter house, which was the old seminary in front of the cathedral.
Right. So I knew he lived in the School of the Prophets for a while, but I didn't know there was another house.
Before that, there was another house, a little cottage
near
the back gate.
Near
the back gate. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. Could you tell me what was your first memory of Grace Cathedral?
Probably as a little chorister being interviewed by the Richard Purvis, the organist choir master, who was very gruff on the outside, but it's warm on the inside. Yes, I was 9 years old, and I joined the choir.
Yeah,
that's how I started.
You were one of our choristers.
I was 1956.
What did you take away from that experience in 1956 of being a chorister? How did it shape the rest of your life?
It's interesting. I don't think I was a very great singer, but I think the community of being in the choir was really helpful for me, and just being in the cathedral itself, it sort of grew into me somehow. The history started to flow into me, and it's harder to express in words really, but it became part of me.
Yeah, I feel. One way to use kind of like a metaphor is it's kind of a technology for being connected to God. So something that human beings can do that help us to feel God's presence more easily.
It's sort of a shortcut.
Yeah, in a way, you're right. You're exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about your father too and his connection to the cathedral.
My father was in the Royal Navy, and he married a San Francisco girl, and in the Chapel of Grace, right above us, in 1945. And then he was sent to Australia to teach the Australian Navy fire control and so forth. And they came back here because her parents were here, and he joined the cathedral, became a worker at the cathedral. Yeah. Business manager, bursar, ran the greeting cards department, and had these rooms were his room, part of his rooms. And when he retired in the 70s, I'd learned enough about the archives, which he started really as in a small way, to continue. And so I did, and eventually in 1982, Dean Gillespie hired me. So that's how I started here officially as the archivist.
Yeah, the work that you do is extraordinary. I just, in the amount of institutional memory, there's so many times where I'm writing you an email telling me more about the window that Dean Gresham dedicated to his wife, or all these. But one of my favorite things is that you have this thing called Visitor One, and it's a binder that has a description of all the art in the cathedral. When did you start working on that? And what were some of the challenges in putting it together?
Well, I started with a little pamphlet on a guide to Grace Cathedral, maybe 3 or 4 pages.
Yeah.
And it just grew from there. And I just added more and more information as I learned it and as I accumulated it. And now we have the source book, which is about 50, 60 pages long.
Yeah, for me, it's a PDF file, and so I can search it.
So we have it on file.
Yeah, so I want to know every reference to St. Bernard. I just type Bernard and I get everything.
That's great.
It's
That's
perfect for preaching.
Oh, really? That's great.
Oh,
That's
I
great,
use
yeah.
it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think the images in the windows too inspire me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so I know that I read the figures that we have in our windows more carefully than I do,
Mm-hmm.
other.
I think you're unique among the deans in doing that, as far as I know.
I'm probably also unique of just doing the yoga practice because it
that
means that
too.
I'm watching it for so long.
Yes, yes.
So, what are some of the treasures that are in this archive?
Well, one of the treasures really is our blueprints because they go back to the beginning. And a lot of other institutions don't have their blueprints, and we are very, very lucky to have all of that here. We have things like historic stones. We have all of these. Some of these are quite rare books on and by bishops and deans, clergy, and so forth. And I mean, it goes on and on.
You know what I love is that you have Alan Jones's sermon, like the sermons that were published.
We do.
It's really
We do. In fact, they're right here.
Oh, that's great. Every time at Christmas and Easter especially, I'm like, send
these
me the books.
These are just some of his books, really.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Some of his sermons, rather.
Yeah. No, I'm going to take this with me when I leave to borrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's also great photographs here too. Can you describe some of the photographs that are in these three?
We have photographs going back to our parish days
wow.
Grace Church, and there's even a drawing of Grace Chapel, which is our founding building. And then all of the earthquake and the fire, of course, happened, and we have the wonderful pictures of the ruins of Grace Church, and then the whole building of Grace Cathedral, a lot of which were taken by Moulin Studios, and they have the rights to many of those, unfortunately. But there are hundreds of those, fortunately.
Yeah.
So
I just watched the television program from the nation's first cathedral that has Julian Bartlett talking about some of our treasures but I watched the whole show.
Yes.
It has some beautiful images of the cathedral being built and constructed.
It does, and we have things also, things like Duke Ellington's concert here, his sacred concert on film.
Yeah.
And of course that's been put onto video already. But Martin Luther King and other people who were here, it's a remarkable collection.
Yeah, and you were here for many of those events. Can you tell us what it was like when they finished building the cathedral? Like when they, not finished, because we still haven't finished, but when we finished the last stage in 1964.
What was really exciting for me was being up in the choir and seeing the screen, which was the back of the unfinished cathedral, come down and the rose window appear for the first time in the entire length of the building. That was really remarkable.
Wow. I didn't even know that there was such a moment, but that sounds spectacular.
It really was. I think they took two or three Sundays to bring it down that whole surface.
Yeah,
So,
for decades, the cathedral was half constructed with a metal, tin roof, all the way from the floor to the ceiling.
we called it the Iron Curtain.
The Iron Curtain, exactly. It was perfect for those days.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah, and does it require any special abilities to organize things? Like, do you have to learn something before you become an archivist, or?
I'm self-taught, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's so much in me now that I can just regurgitate, if you'll excuse the expression, all the information and put it into my source book. And I'm also writing history of the cathedral, of course.
Yeah.
That will come out maybe in a few years, hopefully.
Yeah, I had coffee with Judy Robinson, who wrote a diocesan one. She admires your work very much.
I admire her work very much too. Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and I'm so glad to have you as our guest on More Good News.
I'm honored to be here.
Michael Lampen, Malcolm Young, here at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California. Thanks for watching More Good News.